Welcome back to the Discovery Engine Laboratory. Now, just a heads up, this explainer isn't your standard casual overview. You can really consider this a strict technical orientation into the literal mechanics of human awareness. We're going to be exploring the definitive edition of the Resolution of Mind, or TROM, which was originally developed by Dennis H. Stevens. We are going to use pure logic today to pinpoint exactly why the human mind gets trapped in persistent conflict and, much more importantly, how to mechanically dismantle that trap.
Okay, let's dive into this, because we really have to immediately challenge our reliance on traditional self-help and standard therapy models. Look, there is a very specific type of suffering that intelligent, self-aware people face. You know exactly what you're doing wrong. You've analyzed it, you understand it perfectly, and yet you just do it again. Why? Well, it's because understanding operates completely outside the system, while actual change requires addressing the internal mechanics of the system itself. Merely describing the beautiful architecture of a locked room doesn't actually open the door, right?
So, here is our master roadmap, basically our standard operating procedure for this session. We'll start by entering the laboratory, then cover the algebra of sanity, the mechanics of insanity, the macrogeometry of the tube universe, and finally, the exact protocol for reclaiming your freedom.
All right, Section 1. Enter the laboratory. We need to shift your mindset from consumer to researcher.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we mean by that shift. To navigate precise systems, you absolutely have to leave the passive passenger seat behind. Think of it like a river that floods every single spring. The consumer is the person frantically building sandbags, right? They're seeking passive understanding and mere symptom management. Now, the sandbags aren't useless, but they operate completely downstream of the actual cause. The researcher, on the other hand, hikes upstream to fix the watershed itself. As a researcher, you are seeking the mechanical resolution of the underlying structure. And in this case, that structure is the postulate structure of your own mind.
Moving on to Section 2, the algebra of sanity, let's establish our mathematical baseline. Dennis Stevens did something totally radical here. He treated the mind exactly like a physics engine, and the crucial mathematical baseline for that engine is this equation: x times 1 minus x equals 0. In the algebra of classes, this is the Boolean axiom stating that a concept and its complete absence share absolutely no common class. They literally do not overlap. There is no position in existence where you are simultaneously knowing and not knowing in the exact same way. The product of a thing and its absence is always 0. So the crucial point is that in a sane, functioning domain, this clear binary distinction always holds true.
As Dennis Stevens put it so perfectly, the universe can be divided into any concept and its absence. From these two basic axioms, all other logical propositions are derived. From this one purely logical mathematical starting point, we can derive the entire architecture of persistence and human behavior. If this baseline holds, you have genuine choice, you have lightness, and you have native freedom.
Which brings us to Section 3, the mechanics of insanity. Let's look at the recursive glitch. But what happens when that mathematical baseline just breaks down? Look at this terrifying flip. The sanity baseline is x times 1 minus x equals 0. But the insanity loop is x times 1 minus x equals 1. This happens when a thing and its exact absence are forced into an impossible, simultaneous existence. It creates a total deadlock. Honestly, it's the exact psychological equivalent of your computer freezing up because it's trying to execute two completely contradictory commands at the exact same millisecond. The moment some version of X and not a X are actually the same thing becomes operative in a person's mind, the consequences are incredibly severe. And this mathematical deadlock isn't just some abstract philosophical concept. It produces literal physical weight in the mind. Stevens termed this TIP MM, or twin insanity point mass. Think of it as solidified exhaust. It is actual compressed mass that you experience as heaviness. When people describe a literal weight on their chest or a knot in their stomach during a conflict, that is not a metaphor. It's the actual mass produced by a frozen postulate conflict. It's compressed energy locked in a highly stable configuration. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the precise flip in double bonding that locks a person right into this insanity point, or IP state. In the compulsive game state, the bonding is structured one way, but with one simple flip of bonding, the person drops straight into insanity. The postulates literally cross over. They are now holding a postulate and its exact negative simultaneously. They are desperately trying to achieve both at the exact same time. The math breaks, the mass generates, and the trap snaps shut.
Let's move to section 4 and see how this builds into the macrocosmological trap, the tube universe. Okay, we are now zooming way out from the logic of the individual mind to the macro geometry of the trap itself. How did we end up playing these impossible games in the first place? Well, Dennis Stevens mapped this out using a highly technical geometric model called the tube universe. Imagine a 3D cylinder. It's closed at one end and open at the other. The two spatial dimensions form the tube's cross-section. The time dimension is the actual length of the tube, extending from the closed end, which is the beginning of the universe, right up to the open end, which is present time. So as time passes, the tube continuously just gets longer and longer.
So, how do beings actually enter this trap? This is crucial. We are not in some external computer simulation run by a rogue programmer. We are in a restricted reality maintained entirely by our own voluntary agreements. A being observes the game from the outside, thinks, hey, that looks like fun, and voluntarily pops into the tube. But to play, they absolutely must agree to the laws of the tube, meaning limited two-dimensional spatial perception, and, vitally, they become subject to the continue-to-be-known time command. The agreement among beings about what is real is the reality. We literally locked ourselves in. Finally, Section 5, Reclaiming Your Freedom, the Resolution Protocol. We are shifting now from all the diagnostics to the highly technical protocol for practically escaping the tube. This is the exact mechanical procedure to resolve that deadlock. First, you identify the opposing postulates. Let's just call them A and B. Then, you use a strict creative process. You ask yourself, what could A and B have in common? And you run that until there's no more change, effectively filling the null class. Next, you ask the exact reverse. What could A and B not have in common? And you run that until flat, which empties the class again. By alternating these specific commands back and forth, you systematically dismantle the double bind until the electrical charge completely vanishes. Let's look at an example. Imagine someone stuck with a seemingly absurd double bind from childhood. If a person is wearing a dress, then they're a girl, while simultaneously holding the idea that all girls wear dresses. Now, even if it totally conflicts with reality, a person can always internally justify their own postulates. By defining a person wearing a dress as Class A and a non-girl as Class B, you simply ask, what could a person wearing a dress and a non-girl have in common? The subject struggles a bit, creates answers, fills the class, and then you reverse it to empty the class. This purely logical method, piece by piece, dismantles even the most deeply justified, mass-generating conflicts you can imagine. So we've moved from the flooding river of your symptoms right up to the literal watershed of your deepest postulates. We've seen exactly how the Boolean math of the mind works, how it breaks to form the literal physical mass of anxiety and the precise geometric nature of the tube universe we all agreed to enter. The tools to break these double binds are entirely mechanical, they are entirely logical, and they are completely in your hands. So the final question I have for you is this. Are you ready to stop being played by the game, abandon your passive consumer habits, and start actively running the discovery engine for yourself?